In 1903, the most respected scientist in America, funded by the government, tried to fly a machine off the Potomac River. It plunged straight into the water. 9 days later, two brothers who never finished high school who repaired bicycles for a living rose into the sky. And for 5 years, almost no one believed them. These are Wilbur and Orville Wright. No college degrees, no fortune, no famous backers, just a small bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio. So how did two ordinary mechanics solve a problem that had killed brilliant men for centuries? And why, once they had done it, did the entire world call them liars? They were raised by a father who once brought home a small toy helicopter, powered by a twisted rubber band. The boys flew it until it broke, then built their own. As young men, they opened a bicycle shop, and it was there, among the gears and the spokes and the quiet tinkering, that they began to think seriously about flight. For all of history, flight had been a deadly dream. Men strapped wings to their arms and leapt from towers, and they died. Inventors built machines with flapping wings and heavy engines, and they failed. By the 1890s, many of the greatest minds in the world had agreed on one thing: human flight might simply be impossible. Then in 1896, a German named Otto Lilienthal, the world's leading glider pioneer, fell from the sky and broke his back. His last words were, "Sacrifices must be made." His death shook the Wrights deeply. But where others saw a warning to stop, they saw a question that no one had yet answered. Everyone before them had obsessed over one thing: power. The Wrights realized the real problem was control. A flying machine was not like a cart on rails. It was like a bicycle in the sky. Unstable, alive, needing constant balance. And balancing an unstable machine was something they, as bicycle men, understood better than anyone. Wilbur watched birds for hours. He saw how they twisted the very tips of their wings to roll and to turn. One day, idly twisting an empty cardboard box in his hands, he saw it. If you could warp the wings of a machine in the same way, you could make it bank and turn like a living bird. That was the key that no one else had found. But when they tested their gliders, the numbers were all wrong. The official flight data published by respected scientists was simply false. So the brothers did something radical. They built their own wind tunnel, tested 200 different wing shapes, and rewrote the science of flight from scratch with their own hands in the back of a bicycle shop. Meanwhile, they had a rival. Samuel Langley, head of the mighty Smithsonian Institution, backed by $50,000 of government money. In October 1903, he launched his great flying machine off a houseboat before a crowd of reporters. It dropped like a stone into the Potomac. He tried again in December. It collapsed on takeoff. The newspapers mocked him without mercy. Just 9 days later, on the 17th of December 1903, on a cold and windy beach at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, Orville Wright lay flat on their machine and lifted into the air. 12 seconds. 120 feet. It does not sound like much, but in those 12 seconds, the entire history of the world quietly changed. They had done it: powered, controlled, sustained human flight for the first time ever. They sent a telegram home to their father, and then something strange happened. Nothing. Only a handful of newspapers reported it at all, and most of them got the facts completely wrong. The greatest achievement of the age was met with a shrug. For years, the Wrights kept flying in a cow pasture near Dayton in plain view of a passing trolley line. They flew circles, figure eights, stayed airborne for half an hour at a time, and still respected magazines called them bluffers. One famous headline asked simply, "Flyers or liars?" The world had waited centuries for flight and now refused to believe it had come. Wounded by the mockery and terrified that someone would steal their design, the brothers grew secretive. They stopped flying in public. They refused to show the machine to anyone until they had a signed contract and an ironclad patent. For nearly 3 years, the men who had conquered the sky kept it hidden on the ground. Finally, in 1908, Wilbur traveled to France, where crowds openly called the Americans frauds and cheats. He said nothing in reply. He simply took off. He banked, he turned, he carved effortless circles in the sky while the machine seemed to obey his very thoughts. The jeering crowd fell silent, and then they wept and roared his name. Overnight, the doubt was gone forever. Wilbur Wright became the most famous man in the world. Kings, queens, and millions of ordinary people came just to watch him fly. The bicycle mechanics from Ohio had not only invented the airplane, they had at last proven it to a world that for 5 long years had refused to see. But triumph carried a terrible price. The endless lawsuits, the constant travel, the crushing pressure wore Wilbur down. In 1912, at just 45 years old, he caught typhoid fever and he died. The quiet, brilliant mind that had truly cracked the secret of flight was gone, only 4 years after the world finally believed him. Orville was left alone and heartbroken. He spent years locked in bitter patent wars, fighting rivals who turned his own breakthroughs against him. The pure joy of invention curdled into courtrooms and legal fees. The very success the brothers had fought so hard for was slowly poisoning everything they had built together. Worse still, the Smithsonian, the institution of his old rival Langley, tried to rewrite history itself. It displayed Langley's failed machine as the first craft ever capable of flight. Furious, Orville did the unthinkable. He sent the original Wright Flyer, the true first airplane, into exile across the ocean to a museum in London. Meanwhile, the invention took on a life of its own. Only 11 years after Kitty Hawk, the skies of Europe filled with warplanes. The gentle dream of two brothers had become an engine of war. Orville watched, uneasy, as the machine he built to lift up humanity was bent into a weapon to tear it apart. He lived a long time, long enough to see just how far his 12 seconds had reached. He saw airliners cross entire continents. He saw fighters and bombers darken the sky. And in 1945, he saw a single airplane drop one bomb that erased a city. He had helped give the world its wings. He was no longer sure the world had been ready for them. Near the end of his life, the long feud was finally settled. The Smithsonian admitted the truth, and the original flyer came home to America in triumph. Orville died in 1948, having lived all the way from a world of horses and bicycles into the age of jet engines and the very edge of space. Think about that span for a moment. A boy who once played with a broken rubber band toy lived to see supersonic flight. And every single aircraft that followed, every airliner you have ever boarded, every jet that has ever crossed the sky, is a direct descendant of that fragile machine of wood and cloth on a windy beach in 1903. So why did they succeed where geniuses and governments had failed? Not money, not fame, they had almost none of either. They succeeded because they asked the right question. Control, not just power. Because they trusted their own hands over famous experts. And because two ordinary brothers simply refused to believe the sky was closed to them. It took the world 5 years to believe what happened at Kitty Hawk, and barely 66 years after those 12 seconds, a human being stepped down onto the surface of the moon, from a bicycle shop to another world in a single human lifetime. So let me leave you with one question. What impossible thing are we all refusing to believe right now?